Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another live iThemes training webinar. My name is Nathan Ingram. I'm the host here at iThemes Training, and today we are joined by Lindsay Halsey. Lindsay is the co-founder of Pathfinder SEO, where she teaches business owners and freelancers how to get found in Google and Yahoo and Bing. Lindsay is based in Basalt, Colorado, and after 10 years as a partner in a search engine optimization agency, she noticed that the traditional approaches to SEO left a lot of people behind. So either the cost of hiring an agency was prohibitive or the do-it-yourself approach was overwhelming. So Lindsay and the team at Pathfinder thought there has to be a better way, and they developed what they call guided SEO. Now today, Lindsay's going to be talking to us about how to get into position 0, which always seems to be the goal. So it's going to be a great webinar today. Lindsay, welcome back to iThemes Training. Glad you're with us.
Thanks, Nathan.
So Dennis was just saying in the pre-show there in the chat room that he was the newest customer of Pathfinder SEO. Tell us just a little bit about what you guys do there at Pathfinder.
Pathfinder SEO is focused on guided SEO. So the traditional models are hiring an agency or going do-it-yourself to get found in Google, Yahoo, and Bing. And with Pathfinder, we offer an alternative solution for business owners, freelancers, and agencies called guided SEO.
Right. So you sort of function like an SEO coach, right? As freelancers are doing the work themselves, you're there sort of as a sounding board and additional resources.
Exactly. We provide an SEO process that freelancers and business owners can follow so they can really take action within the SEO space. We provide a tool set, things like keyword research, keyword rankings, monthly reports, and then monthly coaching sessions, sort of like meeting with your personal trainer in a gym.
Very, very cool. Concerning the process, we've done a lot of training on SEO over the years here on iThemes Training, and yours have been very valuable. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from the last several webinars you've done with us. But we have coming up next week an SEO bootcamp where that process is going to be talked about even more. So give us just a quick overview of what's happening February 11th through 13th. And as she does that, folks, if you'd like to learn more, click on that yellow button in the little sidebar ad there, and it'll pull up the page that describes the full SEO bootcamp and what's going to happen.
The SEO Bootcamp is going to be 3 days of training next week, starting on Monday, and we are going to focus on the 4 pillars of SEO. We're going to take a very actionable approach, so we'll be looking at a handful of slides, but then doing a lot of live demoing of the actual steps that we recommend people take to help their websites and their clients' websites get found in Google. Day 1 is going to be all about technical SEO. Day 2 is going to be all about content and on-site SEO, and then day 3 is going to be the big one, which is off-site SEO, link building, social media, local search, and then come the following week, we're going to be diving into a business training. So talking about how to sell and price SEO services to your clients.
Awesome. So a lot of good information there. It's going to be a great week next week. So if you've not yet registered, the deadline for early bird registration is tonight at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So if you're waiting to the last minute, you're basically there. So if you'd like to save $50 off the cost of bootcamp, click on that yellow button and get registered today. Going to be a great week next week, and then the following Monday as well for that business bootcamp. A lot of good information. If you want to do SEO in your business, or if you just want to take the do-it-yourself approach for your own sites, this is definitely the way to go. So a couple of housekeeping details before we get started in today's webinar. If you're just joining us in GoToWebinar, make sure you are in the chat room, which is located at iThemes.com/chat. iThemes.com/chat. We do not use the questions feature in the GoToWebinar control panel. So if you would have questions along the way, we encourage that. Just drop them in there in the chat room. Again, iThemes.com/chat. Always helpful if you preface your question with the word question in all uppercase. And my job is to save those, and we'll give those to Lindsay as she's wrapping up today in our time of questions and answers. One other thing, as you ask a question, make sure you watch the chat because I may have a follow-up question for you just to clarify what your question is. So make sure if you ask a question, watch the chat and see if there are any follow-ups. The slide link for today is there in the chat room already. And if you'd like to watch the replay, we're going to go ahead and give you that link as well. It'll be up about an hour or so after we wrap up today. That link is there in the chat along with the slides. So I think that covers all the details. Lindsay, let's jump in and talk about getting into position 0.
Okay, great. So today's agenda is to review what position zero actually is, why it's valuable. We'll talk about how to achieve position zero results and walk you through a 4-step process that you can apply for your business. We'll look at some frequently asked questions, and then we'll wrap up by chatting a little bit more about the SEO Bootcamp. So first and foremost, position zero is information presented in Google that is above the fold. It's the same as a featured snippet. Here are a couple examples of the 3 common ways that Google features content in these featured snippets or position zero results. The first is for a query, how to install a WordPress theme. And what you can see here is that Google is creating a list in the search results by pulling the results from another person's website and listing out the steps that one would take to accomplish this how-to. Here's another example of someone searching for what is Gutenberg. I was interested to see that the WordPress space really owns this space currently. And when you do that search, you get a paragraph result. So you get a couple of sentences of text that quickly answers the search results for the query asked. And then lastly, a position zero result that shows a table. So if here I'm looking for a conversion table for cups to ounces, Google's going to give me a table result. And in all of these position zero results, what Google is trying to do is provide relevant results in a timely manner to searchers. And at first, when Google rolled out position zero, a lot of marketers started to complain. They saw this as a way for Google to take traffic away from their websites and saw this as something where people aren't going to click through to the result because they get the answer instantly in the search results, and then they just return to Google and do what Google loves for us to do, which is search again in Google. But in this, in 2018 and certainly into 2019 here, we're really seeing search engine marketing take off with this concept of creating content and updating your website in ways that will help your business and help your client's business capture these results, because the value has been really highly proven. Sorry about that. I switched computers today and found a weak spot. So here we go with a little bit of why position zero is valuable. The first thing is position zero is the new number 1. So we see the position zero result as being actually superior in many cases to what we've always been trying to accomplish with number 1 results. The next reason why position zero is valuable is because we can increase website visitors and sales. So instead of seeing position zero as being a setback that's going to not influence getting traffic to your site, we see position zero as this great opportunity for your brand to leverage to the top of the search results and actually land above traditional organic results. It's great for establishing your brand expertise. When you own a search result, something like what is Gutenberg, and your business is the one providing that definitive answer at the top of Google, that's great for promoting your brand in whatever your keyword space is. If in that case, it was a WordPress example. Another is that position zero results are often used in voice search. So as we all start to think ahead of how to position our websites and our brands for voice search and tools like Alexa, we find that a lot of these results are actually being generated in the same way and from these same featured snippets that Google is creating in their search results. And so you're sort of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. By thinking ahead to position zero, you're also thinking ahead to the world of voice search. A couple of statistics. The first is 11% of all search results have a featured snippet. Another is that 9% of the clicks go to the featured snippet. And this has decreased the click-through rate for those keywords that do lead to featured snippets for that number 1 position. And so something that we've seen for some of our clients is a little bit of frustration where they were owning the number 1 or the number 2 space, and they stayed consistent in that rank and in that position in the traditional organic search results, but they saw their click-through rates drop because Google added in this featured snippet that's above that position 1 result. And thus we say position zero is now the new position 1. So the biggest question of what I want to walk you through today is how do I achieve position zero results? And we're going to stay a little bit in the WordPress space that we all know and love in terms of an example to walk through while I share this 4-step process. But this same concept, the same process can be applied to any keyword space on the web. And we start to focus our efforts by identifying position 0 opportunities. So what are we looking for in terms of position 0 opportunities? We turn to keywords, and we've done a recent training on keyword research, and this is a slight twist on what we're looking for in terms of position 0 oriented keywords. First, we want to find keywords that have a featured snippet or that lend themselves well to that position 0 search result. So we're going to look and explore what that means. And then there's another element that's important, which is we need to also find keywords that we already rank for. And that's because there's a statistic that shows that 99% of featured snippets are coming from pages that already have a page 1 ranking. And so this can be a little bit demoralizing for some that are just getting into this space of SEO, and maybe they don't have a lot of page 1 rankings. And so what we look at is we say the first one is critical. You have to have keywords that that contain a featured snippet or that position 0 result. You have to position your content into that. And the number 2 one is ideal, but realize that you can work towards that by creating and following this process, so that not in every case that I do this for, not every time I meet this second goal. So position 0 keyword research, my favorite tool, as we've mentioned on some past webinars, is Answer the Public. And what Answer the Public does is it allows me to put in a concept, a couple word phrase, and it's going to generate a slew of keyword phrase suggestions of what people are searching for that are related to that topic. A tip is to start with a keyword phrase that has 2 words in it. That's where I find Answer the Public to be the most robust in terms of suggestions. Here I threw out WordPress themes, and I got a long list of questions, prepositions, and comparisons related to WordPress themes. And then I start to build this out into a block. And so we talked about trying to pick this keyword space that's going to lend itself to position 0 results, Google actually showing that featured snippet. And here is a matrix that breaks that down. Here I looked at just the general concept of WordPress, and these are all questions that lend themselves, or statements and search queries that lend themselves to a position 0 result. So questions that begin with why. Why is WordPress the best? Questions that start with what. What is WordPress? Questions with when WordPress 5.0. Who, WordPress who can post popped up. How is WordPress developed? How WordPress plugins work? Can WordPress be used for e-commerce? Is WordPress SEO friendly? Should I use WordPress? Which WordPress hosting? WordPress, where is the robots.txt? Are WordPress plugins free? A comparison, WordPress or Squarespace without WordPress without theme? And will WordPress 5.0 break my site? So these are just an example deck of if we were unpacking the concept of WordPress, a lot of the questions that lend themselves nicely to position 0 results, where I might start to try to position my content and position my website in this space. So when I do this exercise for my own business or for my customers' businesses, I start with this list and I basically brainstorm on a piece of paper using tools like Answer the Public or Google Search Suggest. And I try to create a list of questions. For some of these topics, I might have several statements that relate to why or what or when. And I start to develop where this keyword space is really rich and lends itself to a position 0 result, but where also I have a particular expertise or my client has a particular expertise. Once I have that really nice content deck or keyword deck there built out, the next tip is that you really need to go for in-depth content. We say in-depth content for the win. When we talk about in-depth content, we're talking about long-form evergreen content. We're targeting at least 2,000 words, we're unpacking a topic, and we're providing a lot of context. So let's explore this a bit further. When we talk about long-form evergreen content, what we're thinking about is concepts and topics like definitive guide to. So you could create a definitive guide to WordPress hosting and unpacks the concept of WordPress hosting across all of those different keyword spaces to create a really robust resource on the internet. And what we see is that Google is more likely to pull those snippets and those featured search results they're more likely to pull those from long form content than from a blog post or a piece of content on your website that's entirely dedicated to that topic. And so that might seem a little counterintuitive. If you were trying to target, say, WordPress themes, and you found the featured snippet opportunity of what are WordPress themes, you would think that writing a blog post or a piece of content that's 100% dedicated to the phrase, what are WordPress themes, would be the most likely to rank and perform well in that position 0 result. But instead, Google actually extracts that information directly out of a web page from something with much longer form content and goes to a notch above. So here we're saying if I wanted to rank for what are WordPress themes, I would actually want to create a piece of content, the definitive guide to WordPress themes, or an ultimate guide to WordPress themes, or the 2019 guide to WordPress themes. A lot of different options there. So once I have that keyword list for my first step, and I'm starting to think about what my big long form content initiative is going to be, the next thing I like to do is start an outline. So this is where I go through that brainstorm list and I look at my title and I say, how am I going to organize this information in a way that is going to be really useful for not only the search engines, but most importantly for visitors. And so here I made a list of basically what I might want to touch and cover in this definitive guide. And I'm going to break it down, this content down that I'm writing, into these different segments so that Google can really easily latch on to these different concepts and phrases like are WordPress themes free. The next thing to think about within creating this long form content is that context is king. We're going to need to identify and use keywords that provide context around the broader topic. So we have our list of questions, and we also have this concept of LSI keywords. And over the years, Google has gotten much better at understanding language. And we're all very thankful because the internet is a better place as a result. We can all remember back to a time where in SEO, if you wanted to rank for the phrase Java, you would just repeat the phrase Java, Java, Java all over throughout your content, so much so that it stood out as being poorly written content from a user standpoint, but it often ranked really well because of the repetitive use of a singular phrase. Well, fortunately, now context is king. And so now we can actually use phrases that relate to the overall focus keyword of our piece. And we're looking for phrases that are related to that focus keyword. So in this case, our focus keyword is in the WordPress theme space. So other words that would help the search engines provide context around what the big topic is would be phrases like plugins, page builders, the word responsive, design. You could use longer form versions of the keyword like WordPress themes for restaurants, WordPress themes for blogs. And all of these words would help Google get a better understanding of what your content is about than if you just repeat the phrase WordPress themes over and over again within your content. So when I'm preparing for this step 2, which is basically writing my content, I'm thinking about my outline. I'm thinking about what maybe other competitors are doing and what my content to be better, ideally, so that it truly is the ultimate guide or the definitive guide too. And I'm starting to think about what other word choices should I be using to make sure that my content has a lot of context for the search engines, a lot for them to sink their teeth into and to understand what it is that I'm trying to talk about. The next thing I focus on before I even get writing is what we call snippet bait. So here we're going to have this long form 2,000 word plus blog post. And out of it, Google is going to extract only a little bit of information to go into the featured snippet result. And so we want to put a lot of effort on that snippet. That is our best chance of not only having the snippet get pulled through, but also saying something compelling and meaningful in a short number of words or phrases is going to be a lot harder than expressing yourself in the long form version. And so it depends on what your goal is for your piece or for your snippets. If you're trying to get into the paragraph results that we looked at in the beginning, you're thinking about your snippet being 40 to 60 word block of content. And that block of content usually lives right below whatever the search query would be. So if it is what are WordPress themes, then I have 40 to 60 words right below it in my content to succinctly in a very compelling manner answer the question. And then I'm going to unpack that topic much further and in more depth. But I need something that Google can just grab right away that's positioned literally right below the question or the search phrase that I'm trying to accomplish. The good news with paragraphs is that 81% of featured snippets are of the paragraph format. So that's going to be a really common feature that you might utilize in your writing style and what you might want to focus on. 11% of featured snippets are in the list format. And so with a list, you're actually trying to go after kind of bullet pointing out what your list is. So in this topic, I said I was going to share a 4-step process to getting found in voice search. So if I was doing a piece of content around voice search on my website, I would want the 4 bullet points, the 4 most compelling steps, to be in a list format that Google could very easily unpack and grab and drop into that featured snippet. Only 7% of featured snippets are in a table, and that just needs to be an easily extractable table. So it needs to be well built with good solid HTML that Google can just pick up and grab. And anytime you're doing this, you're really putting your content first. So if the answer to the question is best answered in a table format, then that's what you want to go with. If it's best answered like the what is Gutenberg in a quick couple sentence answer, then you want to go with a paragraph. And if it's something oriented to a process or a list or bullet points, then that's what you want to try to go after. But before I get writing, I focus on my snippet bait and really try to put the most effort into that content so that I have really good structure when I go to write and know where I'm heading. I also circle back around at the end of it to go back and say, okay, now that I've written the 2,000 or 3,000 words, and I started with this nice outline, how does my snippet bait maybe potentially evolve? Did I add an extra step to my 4-step process and it's now 5 steps and I need to go back and rework what that list looks like? So now we've done our keyword research, we found an optimal space, and we've done the actual hard part, which is writing the content. And that is often a stumbling block for people, is just sitting down and finding the time to write long form content. And over the years, there's been so much emphasis on blogging frequency, people trying to blog 2 times a week or 3 times a week and blogging with this level of consistency, that then they think of taking on blogging in this new light of now I have to create long form content every time I go out to write, and that can really slow down their writing process. But not every piece of content needs to be written around this concept of voice search. So this is a really purposeful activity where you sit down and you say, for my client or for my own business, I have a particular expertise in this area, and I want to try to extend my website or my client's website into that space and show that expertise and share it. And I'm going to do it by following this process. And the rest of my blog posts, the rest of the week or the rest of the month can be written with my traditional formatting, often quite a bit shorter. So step number 3 is now we need to publish with good on-site SEO best practices. So on-site optimization are the elements on your web pages which help the search engines derive more meaning from the page and its content. With on-site optimization, we break down 4 really important areas when we think about position 0. The first is the new page that I've written needs to have a compelling page title and meta description. This is what gets pulled into the traditional organic search results for that page in the search results. The reason the page title and meta description is really important is because the page title is going to influence my rank. So I'm going to want to make sure I include those focused keywords. In this case, definitive guide to WordPress themes. And my meta description is going to heavily influence click-through rates. So I want to, in a short amount of time, 155 characters, summarize that page so that people can really, and the search engines can really understand what they're going to get if they go ahead and click on that search result. And the page title and meta description don't necessarily get pulled into the position 0 results, but they are really important because they're going to help your page get onto that page 1 of the results. And if you remember back to the earlier part of the presentation, we talked about the 2 things you're looking for. And the second one that you are looking for in your keyword space is that your content already plays nicely in that space. It already is basically on the map. Google already thinks of it as a trusted resource for that keyword space. And so your page title and meta description is going to be a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy there. That helps. It's also going to lead to better click-through rates, which leads to more self-fulfilling process with things like RankBrain kicking into gear and saying, wow, a lot of people are clicking on this result, even though it's in the 8th position. I'm going to move it up to number 5 and help you move your way up into that position 0 result for your keyword. The next feature that's really important in on-site SEO is that you're going to need H1 through H5 tags dialed in. It doesn't mean you're going to use all of these, but your title of your post is going to ordinarily be your H1, and then your different headers, the different ways you're breaking down this content sort of from your outline, are often going to be your H2 tags. And you're going to go through and structure your content in a meaningful way so that the search engines can extract not just the visual appeal of having your content broken out with different fonts and larger font sizes and things like that, but also because they understand the information architecture and hierarchy of your content is one of the things they're getting from that. A little tip and trick if you're going after the list format is oftentimes I'll make the bullet points in my list an H3 tag. And so here my header to the section might be, 5-step process to getting your website found in Google's voice search or something like that. And then underneath the list, and that's in an H2, and then underneath it, I'm going to have H3 for each one of those bullet pointed lists for each header, because that shows that that's what they could really easily grab when they want to extract value and extract meaning out of my content versus just standard paragraph HTML. You're going to want to follow the best practice of having good alt tags on your images because that's another area of providing context and meeting best practices. And then also you're going to want to make sure you use some nice internal links within your on-site optimization. Oftentimes when we sit down to create a definitive guide for a customer, we already have overlapping content with the topic. And so an example is I was working with a client last week about content around energy chews. So they're in the nutrition space. And in that nutrition space, they basically already have a fair amount of content about energy chews, but it's all in a lot of short blog posts and bits and pieces throughout their website. And so there's no definitive guide or singular resource that you would point Google to say, this is everything you need to know about energy chews. And so one of the ways that Google's going to extract more trust and meaning and value out of my content is going to be to have those clear internal links throughout my blog post. So anytime I'm unpacking a topic that maybe I've written about in even more depth somewhere else, I can unpack and write about that topic for a while, and then I can say, head over here essentially on my website to go and get more information that further expands on this topic. And that's another way to just build trust and to pass value throughout your website. And I should mention here that it's not all just about linking to your own internal content. Oftentimes in definitive guides, we'll see really great value out of linking out to other experts in the space that maybe take the topic on further or further validate a concept that you're talking about. So that's the idea of linking externally. And you get some credibility there as well because Google wants the internet to be a very crawlable and friendly place. And so if you're helping to sort of curate additional resources around a topic, that lends value not only to the person you're linking out to, but also back into yourself. It adds a little bit of street creds of saying, this content isn't just me. It's also about you and about others and linking out and being social on the web. So here's an example of just kind of looking at what we were talking about in terms of really basic formatting. So here we have your H2 tag under this topic. What are WordPress themes? We're going to have our snippet bait, that 40 to 60 word, really quick and well-written answer. And then we're going to deep dive into that answer with internal and external links and really unpack it. And then in my definitive guide, I'm going to move on to the next topic, our WordPress themes free. And follow that same format. So now we have our topic, our content written, and our content published. And we've done everything we can to create this piece of content that is structured and written in a way that really lends itself to the position 0 result. And that content is new on the internet, and Google needs to develop some trust around your authority and expertise in the space. And they're going to do that in part via off-site SEO. So everything that's happening related to your brand off the website. And so we say, don't forget about off-site SEO, because it's not as simple as publish new content and it just rises to the top and magically occurs. That's not really how the search engines work. Now they're looking for others to echo how brilliant and how great this content is. And you do that via link building. So link building is everything that happens off your website to build trust and authority. And there are 3 areas of link building. We're going to go into these in quite a bit of depth on day 3 of our SEO bootcamp. But in terms of voice search, you're really looking at link building. And I put local search in here, but that was actually a typo. That's supposed to be social media. So we're really looking at link building and social media, and local search actually doesn't have a great impact on offsite SEO. So I'll get that slide updated for you guys. When we think about link building, the first reaction that anytime I get when I talk about link building is, oh no, I don't like link building, I don't know how to do link building, or link building is spammy. And so people's gut reaction, and the reason they skip this step, is because either they feel like it's against Google's policies and it's not really part of their brand identity, or they really just don't know where to even begin with a topic like link building. And so what we coach people to do is to rely on their professional relationships. And so when you create a new piece of content, you want to do 2 things to kind of leverage your existing relationships in your industry space. One is you want to try to get other businesses to provide a deep link directly into the content that's oriented towards position 0. So I'm going to say, this is my new definitive guide, and I'm going to go out and try to get a partner business to put a link on their website back to this blog post or piece of content. And then I'm also going to go out and ask for some social sharings. I'm going to include tweetable links within the content, but I'm actually going to go out to my professional network and say, hey, I wrote this cool definitive guide. I hope you like it. I'm open to any feedback, any chance you might be willing to share this online. And when you do these things and you rely on your relationships, you help propel this content forward. And so an exercise that we recommend to do so that you can apply the same sort of economies of scale around your relationships is, before you go to relying on them, is to actually outline and document and categorize those relationships. We really want to make sure that no stone goes unturned, and that we are using real life relationships to build links rather than a spammy tactic such as buying a paid link. And so an example would be, in this content, you've written something about the WordPress space. You likely work with other people in this space. And so you're going to want to have a list of basically everybody in your WordPress community as one segment of the population you might rely on for a backlink in this topic. Other times, you're looking at link building, you're looking at podcasts. So maybe you go on a podcast and you talk about this area of expertise, and the podcaster then publishes that podcast to their website with a bio about you. And in that bio, because you talked quite a bit on the podcast about a particular topic, you could say, hey, you know what? You should really go ahead and link to this piece of content for people because it's a really valuable resource to them if they listen to the podcast and they want to learn more, or they want to see this in the written word. Here's a resource. And so these are all actions that we have to take. They're usually as simple as a quick email or an ask, but they're often forgotten in this process because of people's hesitancy to dive into link building. But it's via this link building that you build trust and authority, not only for your website as a whole, but in particular for this piece of content. And so I wanted to show you a quick little example here and walk you through a little bit of a process that I do when I'm creating content for Position 0 that helps me get social shares and other links from other entities and accomplish creating great content. And so here's just a basic paragraph of content. And within this paragraph of content, I had a handful of phrases that I thought lended themselves nicely to other to linking out. And that link could go out to another resource, or it could stay internal to my own resource. And so here I said, I want to provide people more information about web design best practices. I also want to provide people with more information about a WordPress starter guide. And so these are two phrases that were really important to me to link out to additional resources to provide value. And so when I did this, I said, okay, my website doesn't have great content about web design best practices because I'm an SEO, but I'm friends with and partner with a lot of great businesses out there. So what I'm going to go do is bounce over to one of my partners and go to their blog and do a search for the same phrase that I'm looking for. So in this case, I dropped over to the Liquid Web website and I searched for the phrase web design best practices. And I found that blog post was really well written by their team. It was recently updated and it was perfectly matched to this additional information that I wanted to provide. So I put the link out to them. I did the same process for the concept of a WordPress starter guide, which I saw from some other friends was nicely being published that I had seen on social media. So I threw a link in there. And now with these links in hand, I've done a couple of things. The first is I've met that goal of making the internet a better place by providing additional resources and not being all me with my internal links, and actually linking out to some external sources. So my readers and the search engines are going to really like that. But now I have a little bit of link bait buried into my blog post or my content oriented towards position 0. And that link bait is as simple as just notifying these businesses that I've linked to. And a lot of times you don't even have to make the ask. You can just say, I just recently published this piece, thought you might find it interesting. And I included a link to this great blog post that you wrote. And you're providing them with a deep link into a blog post that they'd like to rank for a phrase like web design best practices. And oftentimes when you do this little outreach, you're going to pick up either a link or a social mention or both, which is then in turn going to boost back your content up in terms of domain and page authority. And so this is just a little bit of an example of the idea that hitting the publish button isn't the end game for your position 0 content strategy. You have to go beyond, and you have to be thinking about how this content plays out in the social and the rest of the online sphere in your offsite SEO. Let's look at a handful of frequently asked questions that we get about voice search. The first is, how do I help my clients with position 0? So today we've walked through an example that's probably very close to home for you all in the WordPress space. And so the next step is now we start to think about, well, how do I educate my clients and get them excited and geared up about achieving position 0 results in 2019? And for me, that starts with education. So it starts with providing an overview. Often I do so in like an email or a PDF attachment or something that shares some of those early statistics that I gave you about how position 0 is really valuable, some basics around what position 0 is, because they probably need a little education on just vocabulary. They've seen this in the search results, but they perhaps don't have the words to describe what a featured snippet is, and they don't really know if it relates to their business or not. So it starts with education, and then I like to unpack an example for somebody within their industry. So I go back to that slide where we have that matrix of about 18 or 20 different questions and answer question format. And I actually take a topic that matters to my client, like I just mentioned here, the concept of energy choose. And I go through and I give them a list of like, what are all the different phrases that people are entering into the search engines related to the idea of energy choose that go beyond just that keyword that they've always been focused on, which is just plain old energy choose. So I go and I make that list and I show them, people are asking for what are energy choose? How often should I have energy choose while I'm running? Are energy choose good for tennis players? So I give them this really long list and help them unpack that example in their industry. I then come alongside their efforts and work together on that first post. So we're trying to provide that education of how they can update their writing style if they're doing their own blogging to really write in a manner that's going to be friendly for featured snippets. And then I follow up with them and I get them excited about the results. So I show them what they were able to achieve by applying these techniques to just one blog post. And then it comes back, they come back wanting for more, and we skip the education piece and we go back to that step of unpacking the example as they tackle their second piece or their second long form blog post to help get their website into more position zero results. The other question we really get quite a bit from people is, can I really do this? And our answer is yes. If you really break down getting into position zero into this 4-step process, there isn't one step in this process that isn't something that we can achieve. It's all just a bit of one foot in front of the next and following some standardization here. And as long as you don't forget any of these steps, like forgetting offsite SEO or maybe identifying the wrong keywords in step 1 and then doing steps 2, 3, and 4 really well and wondering why it didn't work, as long as you kind of go through this checklist, you can really do this and you can get your content to rise into that position zero spot, which is a pretty exciting place to be. And that is all for our organized content, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you all about questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of great questions stacked up, but before we get there, just want to have one more reminder about the great event that is scheduled for next week. February 11th through the 13th is SEO Bootcamp with Lindsay. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on Lindsay's presentations here on iThemes Training. Very methodical and easy to follow approach to SEO. Lindsay, once again, just give us a quick highlight of everything we're going to be talking about next week in the bootcamp.
So next week in the bootcamp, we are going to unpack basically each step in our SEO process. And we're going to break that down into 3 days of training. Day 1 is all about technical SEO, making sure that your website pages can get found and indexed, that your sites are easily crawlable, and that there are no errors or warnings that Google's giving us that maybe we're not listening to or don't know how to respond to meet technical SEO best practices. Day 2 is all about content, keyword research, on-site optimization. We're going to look at how do you write page titles and meta descriptions, how do we automate page titles and meta descriptions for really large websites, such as maybe an e-commerce site over on WooCommerce. We're going to be looking at alt text best practices and really just making sure that we leave with a framework of we put the best content out there with the best on-site optimization possible. And then day 3 is going to be all about offsite SEO. So we talked a little bit today about offsite SEO in that step 4. And on day 3 of the bootcamp, we're going to look at the exercises that we do to help our customers build really quality, long-lasting links, social media techniques, and beyond to really make sure that your site has strong authority in the search results.
So a lot of good stuff. Yes,
yeah.
Sorry. A lot of good stuff coming up the next week with the business bootcamp as well.
Exactly. And then the following week, we're going to turn this and say, okay, now you have a process of how you can do SEO for your business and for your client's business. You know all the moving parts and pieces to be really effective at delivering this as a service. Let's take a step back and talk about how do we sell, how do we price, how do we talk about SEO with our clients so that we can turn this into a recurring revenue stream for freelancers and agencies.
Absolutely. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week is the SEO Bootcamp. That's from 1 to 4 p.m. Central each day. And the Business Bootcamp is on Tuesday the 19th. So if you've not yet registered, do that. Today is the last day to get that $50 off discount for the early bird ticket. And that does go away tonight at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So if you're waiting to the last minute, this is the last minute. So take advantage of that deal. Okay, lots of questions stacked up, even more coming in just in the last few minutes here. So, Lindsay, this is going to be some good stuff. You know, sometimes webinars, the questions and answers are almost as good as the content, and I think this is going to be one of those days. So, Sherry, first of all, would like to know, and this is sort of it's kind of an overview of the whole webinar, really, but how do you get that snippet to show in position 1? You said that, a lot of times you already kind of have to be in position 1 to get the position 0 snippet. And Ben sort of followed up with that by saying, if there's, are we trying to take over an existing position 0, or how do we get maybe a new position 0 snippet to appear?
That's a really great question. So you have sort of two choices when it comes to how you're going to get your content into position zero. One is looking for opportunities where you think there should be a position zero result, but there isn't, right? So you do a search and you're like, wow, this really would unpack itself nicely in position zero, but there is no position zero result. But you're confident that the type of query, the phrase, really lends itself well there. And there you're discovering like a brand new opportunity, right? So you found oftentimes it's a question or a comparison between two things that nobody else has already jumped on. And so that's an opportunity to follow this process and try to get a new position zero result to appear there and to make that result your own. And this is sort of like what it was like when keyword research was a little bit more in its infancy, and you would do keyword research and you would find these opportunities that nobody else knew about, and they were sort of secretive. And so there is that opportunity still within this concept of voice search and position zero, because it is a newer marketing technique. And so you might uncover some of those opportunities. The risk there is that maybe your assumption was wrong, and there isn't really an opportunity there because there's already great content and Google's just like deciding not to show a featured snippet for that search query for whatever reason. And so you could put this effort in, and the good news is when you sort of fall on your face, so to speak, with position zero, but you did create that really great content, it still plays really well in traditional organic search results. So it's not like all is lost. It's just you didn't quite achieve what you set out to do, but you'll still likely build a lot of great traffic around that keyword space and get some really good results just out of positions 1 through 10. The other thing that you can do is basically find those opportunities where you see a featured snippet in your keyword space, but you say, I could do better here. So it's like Google's relying on either it's not a very trusted resource. So the player in the space that sort of owns that position zero isn't really an expert or doesn't really have the trust. They just happen to have the content. And so you think you can come in with better content and more sort of domain authority or trust out there and push them out of that result. And so you are looking for those competitive spaces where you say, you know what, actually, I have a different take on this, and I'm going to go out and compete with an existing result.
Yeah, great answer. So along those same lines, 2TD was asking, how long does it, in your experience at least, how long does it take if everything is in place to get that position zero?
It's going to highly depend on how competitive the industry space is, how strong whoever was maybe leading the charge in that keyword space. So in a best case scenario, you're talking a matter of days if you can really build a lot of good links into that content and you found one of those sort of little golden nuggets of areas where the competition wasn't too hard. And in other places, it may take a matter of weeks to even months and be something that you are sort of titrating to effect. So if a client of mine creates this great definitive guide to energy choose, and we get it out there and we come up with a list of our first 3 or 4 links that we think we can get, and we get a nice little play on social media in month 1, then I'm going to track the results. And if we don't get there with maybe as many of the phrases in the blog post as we had hoped, or we just don't get there at all, then we have to say, okay, what's holding us back? Maybe look at the competitive landscape and say, do we need to rework the content a little bit? Or do we really need to double down on that offsite effort? So unfortunately, I can't give you a definitive timeline without a concrete example. So if you're setting client expectations, I always say kind of set them a little further out on the horizon so you can come in for the big win if it happens faster. So don't promise days. And then as you do this practice for your clients and for your own business, you're going to really get that intuitive sense of when you can say like, yep, this is one of those golden nugget opportunities. We've got the content and the links to back it up, and we're going to get this quickly.
Excellent. So Dennis had a question, and Kevin had a good follow-up to it. Dennis was wanting to know how dynamic is position zero. Does it change frequently? And, does it change based on the user who's in position zero? A lot of times your search engine results change based on your search preferences. Does that impact position zero?
That's a good question. Position zero is similar to positions, 1 through 5, where in a mature space, meaning a space with pretty strong players, we don't see a ton of volatility. So it's not like position 3 and position 5 are constantly switching spots, every other day, and they're neck and neck in this battle for more exposure in SEO. Usually those top 5 spots are a little bit, they're not fixed by any means, but it's just, it takes a little bit more. They're not super volatile. And so with position 1, or position 0, it's similar. It's not super volatile. You don't typically see it one day and gone the next. The downside to it is, unlike ranking in spots 1 through 5, where you usually see, players 2 and 3 maybe will make a swap of spots. With position 0, you're sort of there or you're not. So there is no position, 0.1 or something like that, where you can be the runner up and get any value out of that snippet. So you either own it or you don't. And so that's sort of the downside. But in our experience, it's not that highly volatile in a mature keyword space.
Interesting. Paul has a good question here. He says, when you're looking at a position 0 post that you're trying to take over, do you have any sort of process to deconstruct that post that currently holds the position?
Yeah, so I usually go in and I look at the content. So I click on the result and I ask myself, could I write better snippet bait, or did they do an amazing job? I look at the topic and I say, okay, how well did they unpack this topic? So maybe they have this definitive guide, but they're only looking at like 5 key points. And if I had to talk about the topic, I would have 12 key points. So they're sort of falling short on the depth they're providing. And so I come in and I say, to that competitive response, like, oh yeah, I could definitely, write more engaging, longer form content that unpacks this topic even further. And so I'm looking for those types of opportunities. And I certainly don't mind calling a spade. So sometimes I, go in and look at a piece of competitor content and say, wow, this would be a really great place to be. But this competitor has really done an amazing job. And, they have strong domain authority. They've got a lot of great links pointing to this content. Their content is rich. It's recently updated. And we kind of give them the win and move on because most customers and most of our keyword spaces are pretty vast. And so it's not uncommon to be able to go and find a different place to play, essentially.
Excellent. Okay, this is a long question, just forewarning. So this was a bit of a conversation in the chat earlier on. It started out, Suzanne mentioned how her clients complain when she writes too much text and they say people don't read that much. And she said she struggles to teach them how important the longer content is. Somebody else said, yeah, like recipe posts that go on forever before you actually get to the recipe. And then Dave said, then does it make sense to put like an executive summary at the top of an article who hit the users that don't read and then have the rest for SEO? What do you think about that whole situation?
I think Dave's spot on there. So check out the Yoast blog for really good, not surprisingly, Yoast does a really good job with content marketing and sort of drinking their own Kool-Aid. And so if you check out the Yoast blog, you'll see a title, then usually an excerpt. So, a 300-ish word little intro that's in bold. And then you get into, and I should say, I think it's around 300 characters more often, but a little paragraph intro, and then they break down into the content, and they're using that structure of putting questions and H2 tags and then unpacking the answers below it. And so that's a really good blog to just look at from a format standpoint of how you can create this voice search content that's long form, but that doesn't lose the audience right away. And I think the recipe space is a really interesting one to both follow and not follow in terms of best practices, unless you are in the recipe space yourself. So the reason that recipe bloggers have really long blog posts is because they figured out that if they want to rank for banana bread recipe, they can't just have the recipe, have the instructions, have the cooking time, have the right schema markup, and get that content to rank, even though that's actually what I'm looking for, right? As a consumer, I'm looking for the list of the ingredients, the steps I need to take, the reviews, and how long it's going to take me. And that's really all I need from a consumer standpoint. But they've played the game to say basically, well, that doesn't play perfectly well with Google. I have to have the best banana bread recipe on the internet, which they're going to evaluate based on comments and reviews and things like that, but also the length of content. So I need to tell some stories around where this recipe came from, a funny story about how my kids love it or whatever. So I have to create this long form content, and all of that is great. And that's right in line with what we're talking about here of long form content and sharing that expertise in the longer written word format. Where recipe bloggers then kind of change the table around is a lot of their websites are monetized via advertising. So they're looking about getting impressions for their ads and click-through rates to their ads. And so they bury the piece that matters to you the most further down the page, even though that's not necessarily the most user-friendly experience. So I have to scroll down on my mobile device through this like really long-winded introduction, which helps it rank well to get to that like 5 list of the ingredients I need to go shop for while I'm in the market. And so it's an experience we all have, but realize that they're not doing it that way. They're not turning the content around because of that's good for SEO. They're turning the content around because that's good for their impressions on their ads. And so you definitely can pack a punch with your long form blog posts in the beginning so that if people only want to read a little bit of content, that's all they read. And then, they get the gist and they move on. So that's a good practice.
Great information. Gerald would like to know, he says, they're promoting events with lots of changing content and lots of changing providers. Any suggestions for that sort of a content site?
Yeah, so we work with people in the tourism space, a lot of like chambers of commerce and things like that. So they have a lot of rotating events that come through their area. And so what we do there from a strategic standpoint is we pick the big events. So we're not going to do this for everything. And we create definitive guides to that event. So it's not all about just selling tickets to the event or something like that, but it's about providing this resource for people about where they can stay, where they can park, a history of what all the lineups looked like in terms of it's a music event from over the years. So we really try to create like the best resource dedicated to that event on the internet as a static piece of content that we then just come in and update some of the new event information. And so if you can prioritize some of those areas, you can get into position 0 relating to the actual event, so that when someone searches, where do I park when I go to Euler Festival, your search result pops up with the parking guide. And then if you want to be bigger in the event space, meaning it's not search queries related to events, you could be looking for people like what to pack when going to a music festival, or, how to prepare for, and it doesn't have to be a given singular event, but just something in your industry space where you could show your general expertise around events.
Excellent. Another question from Doug. He'd like to know, does using more H tags, H1, 2, 3, 4, have an advantage going deeper in the content than just using H1 and H2?
So I think of my H tags as like a pyramid. I want one H1 tag at the top of the pyramid, usually the title of my blog post or the title of the page. And then I want the way I use H1 through H5 to be very structurally minded so that I'm nesting content under itself. So if I say have an outline, it has 5 key sections. Each of those 5 key sections is going to be an H2 tag. And then under that, if I am really going into a lot of depth, maybe I'm going to have some H3s underneath each one of those H2s that relate to the one above. So I really want to make sure that there's just like logical information architecture being applied to how I use them. And you don't have to go all the way down and get all the way into the H5 tags and things like that. You don't want to necessarily skip. So, just kind of looking for using that common sense approach so that if all Google knew were your H tags, like they didn't read any of the paragraph oriented content, they'd be able to map out sort of what your outline looked like and build that out of the content. Excellent.
So Steve had a question earlier about an actual blog post or a page that follows the on-site optimization, but Lindsay talked about just look at the Yoast blog. She covers that. So Steve, there's your answer. Paul asked, can you address alt tags for SEO versus alt tags for accessibility? And is there a difference, or should there be a difference in approach? And Mike kind of similarly was asking, is it beneficial SEO wise to put image alt and image title tags, or is that overkill?
Those are good questions, and definitely a topic we'll unpack quite a bit more in the SEO bootcamp when we talk about alt text, but happy to talk about it a bit here, which is, I think of it as really one and the same. I go back to the reason that alt tags exist, which is for accessibility. And so when I coach clients on how to write alt tags, I coach them in the idea of saying, okay, if someone couldn't see this picture, how would you describe this image to them using, let's just say, 5 to 8 words or something like that. So we give people these exercises where we're describing the images. We're not telling them, what keywords do you want me to stuff into this alt tag? And so that I put an alt tag that doesn't measure up to what the image is actually about. So we're definitely not into putting like SEO first and shoving keywords into alt tags where they don't really belong. So your images really should play up the strength of your content and be related so that you're naturally putting keywords into your alt tags while meeting the primary goal, which is accessibility.
Absolutely. So what you wouldn't want to do is have something like Los Angeles dentist standing beside dental patient having dental work done in an LA dentistry office, right?
Yes. That would be a little long-winded and not add value to it. So you want to explain it to somebody like, I found this great image of, and then here's my 5 to 8 words that describe a dentist with a patient, and there you got your dentist and your patient in the phrases, and then a couple descriptive phrases, and you move on.
Dentist holding scary tool standing beside frightened child.
Yes.
Maybe not, but yeah. So here's a big picture question from JJ. JJ wanted to know, how does link building relate if you just have a retail e-commerce site? Why is it important for a site like that?
For an e-commerce website, why do you need link building?
Exactly.
So there's no industry in my mind's eye that doesn't need link building. It's easier for some spaces than others, but essentially the way I think about it is about 60% of SEO is your website. So the content on your website, how well it's built, how the great user experience, how fast it is, all of these elements are about 60% of the puzzle. But anyone can essentially create a great website in a space that they're not actually an expert in or have any authority in that space. And so Google, no matter what space you're in, is looking to external websites to understand about your business. And they look to social media to understand more about your brand. They look to local search, Google Maps listings, and then they look to links from other websites that point to yours to understand how your business works. And so in the e-commerce space in particular, you need to basically show your expertise. So we had an e-commerce client that wanted to get really big into selling staples. And they built a really nice looking website all dedicated to selling staples. They had good pricing, good product, but it was a brand new website in the staples space. And they're competing against the likes of people that also sell staples, like say Amazon.
Or Staples.
So yeah, or Staples. So we are in a really competitive keyword space. And yes, we do have a good solution. We have a really well-built e-commerce site. But Google's not going to just trust it until I go out and I build links that point in and that really say this is the best place on the planet to buy your staples. And they're looking for that type of conversation, and they're mapping that via those links. And so I think in the e-commerce space in particular, if you're in a competitive space, is you've got to be engaged in link building, but you don't have to do it in a spammy way. You can definitely just focus on leveraging your business relationships and take it from there.
Interesting. And just as a matter of trivia, I just Googled buy Staples, and Staples, strangely enough, has like the top 10 spots, including all 3 in the 3-pack local.
Yeah, in that example, that customer didn't come to us to vet his business plan. He came to us with a built website and said, help me get this found. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we ultimately used Google Ads, so it's not all is lost. You just might have to pivot your strategy a bit.
Definitely. So we have a couple more questions here. Do you have time for maybe 2 or 3 more minutes?
I do. Fire away.
Okay. So Greg would like to know, when you talked a little bit about external links in a page, is it still best practice to set the rel equals no follow to get to deal with external links?
No, that's not best practice typically anymore. So that was essentially a best practice where you didn't want to bleed page authority when you linked out to other websites. So it's like, I need to add this link to this third party, but I don't actually want to give them that SEO vote of endorsement. I'm just going to put the link in there. And so I put this little instruction label called no follow to say, don't actually follow this link, Google, just let humans follow it, but your crawler shouldn't count this as a vote of endorsement. And generally speaking, you don't want to do that with your content anymore because you're trying to create this more social web and you're trying to model these relationships. And so when I linked from my blog post over to Liquid Web, I'm actually trying to pass value from my website over to their website, and I get something back from that. And so there is an element of the algorithm that does reward external linking. And it's not so much of this concept of me bleeding out my page or my domain authority and giving it away to others. But that being said, there are places where rel nofollow still makes sense. Oftentimes you'll see rel nofollow utilized in places where you don't want Google to think that this link was like purchased or bought. And so somebody will throw that rel nofollow in to just be like, as a point of clarification, this affiliate link isn't related to SEO or something like that. So you do still see that attribute coming into play. But I think from a general, you're writing your position zero content, you're going to link out to say 4 or 5 external resources. I say follow away, Google, and I let that go.
Interesting. Okay, we'll wrap up with this one, and this is a really good question. My own worst enemy said she had a client that was had a featured snippet for a long time, but they lost it when they moved from WordPress to Shopify. It was the same content, the same meta. Would Google downgrade based on platform?
Ooh, that's a really good question. In theory, if it's apples to apples, meaning that content lived at the same URL, had the same structure, nothing changed except for behind the scenes, the content management system, then no, they shouldn't lose it in that move. That being said, there are so many little details in a move like that usually things get forgotten. So maybe WordPress had schema markup and in Shopify they didn't. Maybe the URL changed and they forgot to get a good 301 redirect in place. So there could be factors at play. And so when I look at questions like this from a client, I break it down by first saying, okay, what are the things that we could have maybe done wrong to not preserve this ranking in that move? So they already feel like this change occurred around when we made this website move. So I'm going to try to explore that concept. And then I'm going to look at all the external factors that could have been just total coincidence that it happened around the move, like a competitor creating better content or a competitor going out and getting really good page authority built on their competing piece of content. So there can definitely be those external factors. And so just kind of making sure that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's on sort of that migration of content. And then that you're not just so heads down and thinking it's all about the content management system that you miss some of these other signals like a competitor coming in and pushing you out of that space regardless of your content management system move.
Awesome. All right. I believe that brings us to the end of the questions today. It's been great information. Lots of good takeaways from today. Any last thoughts as we're wrapping up here?
No, just the biggest last thought is you can do it. So it's a really fun project to test out for your business, for your customer's business, and it gets a little bit addicting. So you get that position zero result in one place and say, hey, that was actually fairly easy, and move on to the next topic.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Lindsay, for sharing all of us this information with us today. And thank all of you as well for being with us. Hope it was a great investment of your time. I've learned some things. Hopefully you have as well. Again, my name is Nathan Ingram, and from all of us here at iThemes, we hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time here on iThemes Training, where we go further together.